Hi, everybody. Welcome to Art Speaks today. Art Speaks the Visual Language of Basketry. As Margaret mentioned, I'm Tracy Crum. I'm the Director for Artistic Advancement at Textile Center in Minneapolis. Before I do any introductions to the panelists, I do want to thank the National Basketry Organization for partnering with us on this remarkable biennial exhibition, Basketry Now 2025. We have 68 pieces in the show from 63 artists here on display at Textile Center. It's a really dynamic survey of work of basketry and sculptural work in basketry by artists from all across the country and around the world. Thank you so much to Gyöngy Laky, who served as the juror for the exhibition. It was an honor to be working with her again as well. And for those who are able to visit, the show is up through October 18th. Textile Center is open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. every day, and then late on Thursday nights until 7 p.m. I want to extend a thanks to NBO's exhibit committee members who made the exhibit possible by reaching out to the artists, facilitating the application process and the jury process. That's Peta Tine, Emily DeVoren, and Ann Coddington. Ann is joining us here today as a panelist. Hope I didn't miss anybody on the committee. There were a number of other folks, but those were our main partners at NBO. Also want to send a big shout out and thanks to Textile Center's colleague, Krista McKnight-Sathey, for organizing the program. Textile Center is proud to host Art Speaks as a platform for artist presentations and discussions. And we maintain an archive of these presentations on our website. It's www.textilecentermn.org. Also want to thank New York Textile Month for being a partner in presenting this event today and for promoting it as part of New York Textile Month 10, which is going on right now across sites, at sites all across the New York City regional area, and with events being shared digitally around the world. Now I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists and our moderator and let everyone know we are really honored today to be joined by these very esteemed artists who have very long relationships and with the field of basketry, techniques, materials, and processes. We are joined today by Ann Coddington from Champaign, Illinois, by Carol Eckert from Tempe, Arizona, and by Pat Hickman from the lower Hudson Valley of New York. All three of these artists have work in the shows, and it has been a pleasure to engage with them again. And I've known all of you and your work for decades in my own career. Our moderator today, thank you so much, Diana, is Dr. Diana Greenwold, the Lunder Curator of American Art at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. Dr. Greenwold specializes in late 19th and 20th century American fine and decorative arts. Welcome, Diana, and I'm going to turn the session over to you and let the panelists get started.
Thank you so much. We're actually going to begin with artist presentations, and then I am going to join the conversation a little bit after when everyone has been able to introduce their work. So without further ado, I will turn it to Ann.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to say thank you to the Textile Center, and I am super honored to be speaking in the company of two other artists that I've long admired. So, next, please. This is my life in a nutshell, and I've taught for many years at Eastern Illinois University. I've recently retired from that, and now I'm working full-time in the studio. I teach a lot of workshops. I sing in different groups. I love hanging out with my family, and that's my new grandson. But most of the time, artistically, I'm spending a lot of time in my studio. Okay, next. So what I love about basketry, I love just look at this slide. This kind of encapsulates it. So I love that these thin, lightweight structures. They're vessels and containers. They have utilitarian origins. They're from the domestic sphere. They're biodegradable. I love that it's an ancient human activity and that people can relate to the work materially. Okay. I got my undergrad in fibers and my graduate education in sculpture. And I think these two experiences really shaped who I am as an artist. I worked with Tom Lundberg at Colorado State. And for a while, I worked with Carol Shaw Sutton at Cal State Long Beach. So early on, I turned my focus into really discovering twining and how to start pieces and how to bend them, how to sculpt with them, inventing different ways of making three-dimensional forms using this basketry technique. And then it gradually, I started out really figuratively, and so I worked with trying to discuss different issues and conceptually with the body. And then it gradually became more and more abstracted. So, and I started playing with different, so this is about 10 years into twining. I started playing with different materials, coating the forms. This is coated with red varnish. And next one, please. And then I also started working with larger scale and combining different materials with the twined forms. So then eventually I gradually began working with even more open and structures that had a drape to them. So like is twining with incorporating a kind of netting that I sort of invented. And I liked contrasting the sort of solid masses of the twined texture and structure to the more open, permeable visually and physically aspects of netting. So I also was working with crochet, like the one on the left, and started investigating looping, like the one on the right. So this looping is knotless netting, and dove deep into that. Every time kind of I've introduced a new material or technique into my process, I sort of obsessively do it. So this is the one on the right is an 8-foot tall looped form that probably several of us could get inside. So this is, and if you click it again, it'll start scrolling. So this is how I do ideation. I love to work in my sketchbook, so I'll pop into the studio and often I'll just start drawing. And I start with pencil and then I'll come back in and do watercolor and different materials. I stopped moving. Maybe it can keep moving. If not, that's fine. But it's a way of quickly kind of coming up with ideas. And sometimes these just stay in the sketchbook, and sometimes they make their way into my sculpture. And the last page after this, you'll keep your eye out and you might see that form returning. All right, next. And so this is a pair of pieces I did during COVID. And I began this piece when the US had reached 200,000 who had perished to the pandemic. And I was trying to think about what does 200,000 look like? So I started counting each of the twined stitches. And after I finished the first one on the left, it was at 144,000. So of course I had to make the second one. Okay. And often I make groups of forms that, like this, in this particular grouping, I'm using all different techniques, all different shapes, and it's a kind of a counterpoint to the previous piece, which took many months to make. These take just maybe a week or so to make, and so it taps into how forms can have a dialogue with one another, and to our human desire to collect and arrange things, which is also what this piece is about, called Made and Found. And so this is an arrangement of things that I made and things that I found and things that are a combination of those two. And I like the sort of science-y way that we can investigate these arrangements. And every time I put this piece up, it's a different iteration. Okay. And more recently, my work has turned toward biomorphic abstractions, things that hopefully allude to universal human emotions. Like this one, I'm thinking about the idea of growth and change over time. Or the next one is binding together, like how things are connected. And still on occasion, I'll return to figurative forms. It really just depends. It follows sort of an ideological path. And this is about my father who had an injury to his arm. And I have this sort of magical thinking that if I make this sculpture, it will help mend him. And the next one. And I'm also lately have been leaning into forms that I perceive as very feminine and this idea of the power of femaleness. Like this one that the next one is this is the one that's in the exhibition, and it was the one that I had showed you the sketch of. And the next image is what it looks like me sitting in my studio twining away, and the last one is me. Thank you so much. I think Carol is next, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. When I started out, everything I made was a container or vessel form in some way, and they were often quite small in scale. I've always been interested in animal symbolism, how it's part of so many ancient traditions, and also how it survives into our world, where so many times birds are seen as benevolent symbols and snakes are more evil omens. Oh, over time, the work got more complex and slightly larger, but it was still vessel-based. And then I began to make other forms like books and shrines. I still incorporated containers into some of the pieces. A lot of the shrines had hidden compartments or secret drawers. And then the shrine forms flattened out to become wall pieces. And I also began to do staff compositions. And during this whole time, the work steadily got larger and larger. My current work uses the same materials and processes that I've always used. I work with coiling, which is a very ancient traditional technique, but I adapt it in various ways to follow the form of the creatures that I'm making. And I've always worked with cotton and linen threads over a wire core. Now, all of my work is about humans' relationship to the natural world. Sometimes I focus on mythology as an example of that, on the stories that humans have told since the earliest times as they tried to make sense of their world. This is the Fall of Icarus. It's a floor piece that is scaled to fit onto the human body. And this is a piece about humans' impact on birds. It eventually reached 100 dead birds, and I made each bird based on photographs that were sent to me from across the globe, photographs of dead birds that people found and sent to me after an Instagram request. And a wall piece of all of 23 endangered birds. This one is about 15 feet across. And another wall piece that deals with humans' impact on the birds and threatened species in this world. And next. Well, there. I often incorporate containers or vessel forms into my compositions, and I've begun to include containers in the form of found drawers or found cabinets, as in the piece on the right. I've been working on a series of pieces that's about natural history museums. I'm fascinated by specimens, the bird skins and insect specimens that are part of those collections, but also interested in the ideas, the sort of attitude of human dominion over the natural world that led to the collection of millions of specimens. Next. I'm especially fascinated recently by insect specimens, by their forms and colors, and also as omens of possible climate collapse. And sometimes the insects show up as patterns on vessels. Next, along with bird symbols. And the birds continue to be an important part of my work. This is a large wall piece that's based on taxidermied insect, or not insect, taxidermy bird specimens. Next. And I'll end today with a very recent piece. I've just finished this one. It's titled Shredded. Bald eagles are a bird that's just has many layers of symbolism. In some cultural traditions, it's a sacred bird. In recent years, it was threatened by pesticides, threatened with extinction by pesticides and shooting. And it's also the symbol of the United States.
Okay, I think I'm next. I'd like to thank Textile Center for hosting this exhibit and for the opportunity of having this panel together focused on the exhibit and on basketry. The first slide, please. The use of the word language, as in the visual language of baskets, speaks to me of communication, of meaning, that which is inside and carried by baskets. Lillian Elliott and I identified with this Victorian image as we continued to collaborate for 11 years, creating our fiber sculpture. Collaborating with Lillian, my mentor, colleague, and friend, had a huge impact on the baskets that we made together and on my own individual baskets and thinking. Next. Here we are, Lillian on the left, me on the right, working in our shared studio, which was in Berkeley, California. We worked on our collaborative work one day a week, never on the same piece at the same time. Next. An image of this piece, Nomad, was submitted in our application for the 12th Lausanne Biennial when the theme was textiles as sculpture in 1985. We proposed that we would enlarge this basket in relation to the exhibition gallery room height dimensions. Next. Our studio was way too small for building this giant basket, so my dining room at home became our studio space for months. Lillian is inside the basket, creating the reed structure. Next. Here's a detail of the painted surface, which shows how we simulated the basket image that we submitted for jurying. Next. To get the basket out my front door and for shipping it to Switzerland, we had to cut this large vessel into sections. Fiberworks Gallery provided a space for us to have a trial run, to rebuild the sculpture as we needed a run through before doing this for the first time in Lausanne. Next. And here it is as it's displayed at the biennial. The dimensions are 5 feet by 8 feet 2 inches by 7 feet. After creating this vessel, next, in our subsequent collaborative work, we decided to simplify our structures I had learned, it seemed, how to cover the world with taut skin membrane. Next. We were brutally honest in our collaboration, talking a lot about what we thought worked or didn't work. Neither of us hesitated at the end of a day to say to the other, I hate what you've just done. Our work was forgiving and we could encourage cutting it apart, remaking it, or pitching it. Next. Malignant, a knotted, netted work of mine with a bamboo shuttle still suspended, implies work in progress stopped short, with painted coconut midribs penetrating the body of this form. Next. Death tugs at my ear, live, I am coming. This title comes from an anonymous Roman poem. Here I've used natural materials available to me in Hawaii. Next. After designing the monumental gates for the entrance to the Maui Arts and Cultural Center 30 years ago, I created more work translating fiber to metal. Here in Gone, the imperfect casting, unintended, added to my message. Next. After 9/11, I created this folded flag of palm sheath cloth, allegiance, taking in what had just happened in our country. Next. At a residency in Maine, just after George Floyd's murder, I made this balance net, a visible cry for how much remains out of balance in our history. Next. In the exhibit Woven Histories, Textiles and Modern Abstraction, which originated at the National Gallery of Art and just closed at MoMA, here is our collaborative leaf basket. It's next to one of many baskets by Ed Rosbach, Dorothy Gilbarnes, and others. I was so fortunate to do graduate work with Rosbach at UC Berkeley and remain grateful to those whose influence I continue to appreciate and feel. For me, the artist whose work is missing in Woven Histories is that of Joanne Siegel Branford, whom I personally also count as a very important mentor. Next. Winnow speaks of an agricultural tool I need these days for sifting out what's true from what is false. And finally, next, here is what's in the exhibit, ARG, communicating my personal outraged response verbally and visually to this moment in time. Thank you. And now I think it's Diana.
Thank you to each of you for spending a little bit of time sharing some of your practice and some of your trajectories. I'm extremely grateful to be here in conversation with you all. My connection here is actually largely through Kristen. We were also at UC Berkeley together for our graduate studies, but I went on to curate an exhibition about the first 20 years of the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, which cemented my love for everything craft and fiber related. And I think particularly the form of the basket is something so interesting because it has this very public exterior, but the potential for a very kind of personal and private interior. I love that with so much of each of your works and the medium in general, you're often transforming natural fibers that may not appear kind of inherently strong into something that's incredibly durable. And I love that move that basketry can make so seamlessly between the domestic, the kind of hand wrought, and the sculptural. So as many of you know probably, and as you've seen with Pat's work in Woven Histories, basketry and fiber are having a moment. I'm thinking about Jeremy Frey's work, a Passamaquoddy artist who is most recently at the Art Institute, or Ruth Asawa's work, a huge retrospective up at SF MoMA, not to mention Woven Histories, so still on the road. And what I want to do is also add another exhibition to the hamper here before we begin our conversation together. And it's one that's been on my mind, very present because it has also been on the mind of the administration here. And that's an exhibition at the Smithsonian American Art Museum called The Shape of Power, Stories of Race in American Sculpture. So I'll move to the next slide very quickly. and show you the work of Sean Goshorn. This is a work called Squaw. It's from 2018, and Goshorn is a Cherokee artist. She's using here Cherokee water pattern weaving, and she's using thin sheets of paper. So what you're seeing here on the exterior are the statistics related to the ongoing crises of missing and murdered Indigenous people. So that's all around the exterior. She's using these strips to have the interior actually say the names and tribes of 306 murdered and missing women, along with accounts from their family members. The juxtaposition here, I think, is so interesting. The title squaw, a pejorative word for Indigenous women, but then the use of that idealized female figure, the torso, representative of potentially thinking about the Venus de Milo, so that epitome of classical statuary. And you'll see from the image on the left that the curators in this exhibition have positioned this very deliberately to be in conversation with iconic works of 19th century white marble sculpture. So it's doing this really important work in the context of a sculpture exhibition to be that very kind of pointed counterpoint to work that is often done by men, to that work that often comes from a hard stone sculptural form that one chips away at. Instead, this is an additive form. This is work by an Indigenous female artist with that kind of porousness in the way that she's creating it. So to me, it's a really potent reminder of the work that basketry can do. And to that end, we can actually maybe go back one slide to the work of these three fantastic artists who we have in conversation today. I'd love to kind of begin the conversation by talking to you each, asking you each about that kind of question of the historical nature of basket making, materials that have been used for such a long time. A couple of you indeed mentioned that that connection to ancient practice, but I'd love to hear you each kind of talk about how those kind of older practices integrate into your practice, particularly when you're thinking about how these works can speak to contemporary themes, which again many of you are very deliberately thinking about and representing.
Well, I can jump in here. I think the way I got interested in message and meaning that I really hope my baskets have is when I was living in Turkey for years, I got extremely fascinated by needle lace edging on women's headscarves, and that they could communicate. These tiny little tassels that you almost couldn't see could convey a message to say, I'm fighting with my husband, or I'm pregnant, or, it was amazing to me that these tiny three-dimensional forms had meaning and language. And so that sort of prompted me to really begin to think about how textiles convey some of the things that I think we all are interested in. And up in Alaska, where I have taught in summers at the Fairbanks Arts Festival, I really got interested in Native people's use of skin membrane, and just was fascinated by their stories, by people talking about the meaning of gut and fish skin especially. And so I wanted to begin to explore. And so it was the historic reference that seemed to me to have a continuity to today. And I began to experiment with it as an art material in my own work. But anyway, very definitely historic reference has been tremendously important in my thinking and in my teaching and in my work.
Well, my historic reference is somewhat different. I stumbled upon coiling by accident, but I continue to use it because I guess the way it was invented by earliest people, it was a technique that they could use in any number of ways to make clothing, to make vessels. It's a very flexible, adaptive kind of technique. But my relation to to history comes more through art history. I'm really interested in mythology as it shows up in art history, in things like Persian miniatures, Old Norse manuscripts. So that's the way that history feeds into my work, up until some of my current work, which is influenced by 17th century Flemish paintings of piles of dead creatures.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. And Margaret, I wonder if we could actually move just to our faces since we're in conversation at this point. Thank you. Oh, that's
So,
everybody.
yeah, I can jump in here. So, I lately I've been really thinking about how ancient practices, like the idea that what I'm doing is bringing something so ancient into a contemporary digital world. Like our world is so, can be so devoid of touch and tactility. And I've been reading a lot. I've read about by Rick Dauble. He's a anthropologist, and he says he thinks basketry is as old as 2 million years ago. And the idea that I'm doing something that an early, you know, Paleolithic people were actually engaged in today's world is that kind of juxtaposition to me is really fascinating. The idea that we have a Stone Age, we have an Iron Age, but he purports, and I think it's probably true, that prior to all of that was a textile age that has yet to be sort of identified and singled out. And because of its ephemeral nature, probably the first person that made a basket either stole one off from a bird or picked up a large leaf and folded it and put a couple of pine needles through it, and there they had a vessel. And so to think that, yeah, and of course those disappeared. So how could we have evidence of that? But a cordage age or a basketry age would certainly have to be in the mix of the rise of human beings. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
I love that. It makes me think of Elizabeth Barber's women's work and that notion of 2000 years of continuous female practice. And I guess I'd be curious too, like whether you all are sort of conscious of this particular facet of making as being something that has long been coded as female. And I know you have recently, as you mentioned, kind of turned to the female form in particular, but whether that is something that's kind of conscious in your making.
Not Not really for me. And I do think, with basketry, there are cultures where baskets were made by the males of the culture. So there is sort of a double.
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, um, I look at these like the classical stone sculptures or, the hierarchical nature of materials in art. And I think about how fibers has sort of rose at the same time as the second wave of feminism in the women's movement. And I think that although there are people of all genders engaging in fiber activities, I do think it stems from this, I picture my grandmother on the edge of the couch crocheting a blanket. It comes from my experience from a female line. And yeah, the most recent political things I have this push in my internally to assert the feminine, and that our voices are matter.
Yeah, I would say that partly through my training at UC Berkeley and Ed Rosbach's teaching textile history, and that was really the core and the foundation of the program that he built around that. And certainly teaching world textiles where all around the world, it was both male and female, and it was not just women's work. I think I tend not to put myself so much in that category, but I'm really interested in how what we have to say can be a kind of form of resistance at this point, and saying no to censorship, no to all kinds of what's going on in the world. And it just seems to me like we have control over what we're able to make, and we're able to say no to so much. And whether it's women or men, that doesn't matter so much to me. It's just really being able to say what I have to say, and how I can say it. Yeah.
I so appreciate that. I'd love to move to actually a question that asks you all to kind of reflect on one another's work. I certainly learned through working on the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts that so much of time at a craft school involves just relationship building. And I know that you all have certainly been circling one another's careers. So would love to just take a moment to allow you to kind of speak a little bit about what you're seeing in one another's work, either resonances or divergences.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to applaud and celebrate what Carol does daily with a blog that she puts out into the world, having somehow overnight magically found basket makers all over the world to wake up the next morning and imagine who is doing what all over. I mean, to me, that and Carol's work now on a book that's about to come out on contemporary basketry, and again, it's on worldwide baskets. I just feel like that and her curatorial work, in addition to her own work, are such major contributions to the field. And her years of leadership, president of National Basketry Organization, those are things that when I think of Carol, all of those things come to mind. So that's it,
Oh,
Carol.
thank you, Bev.
I plug this blog. Certainly also I have learned a great deal.
Well, it touches on what I love about basketry. It's the community, the sense of community in basketry. And the community that I started in was just in this country, but it was like nurturing and supportive. And it was a community that really helped me grow as an artist. And so that even though all my work now doesn't fit neatly into basketry as a field, I feel like it's my home. It's where everything I am grew out of that. And one of the lovely things about the internet is that reach, that international reach. And I just started that blog because I knew a network of people from the basketry community, and I just felt like the work needed more exposure. There was such incredible things happening that perhaps the wider world wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I bet if you haven't subscribed to it, everybody needs to get on that. It's a great counterpoint to other things that we wake up seeing. Yeah, I when we were Diana sent this question over to us ahead of time, and I was thinking, as far as I was thinking more in particular in your studio practices, and I was thinking about how I love in Carol's work how there's an entry into it because it's so beautiful and so elegant, but yet underlying that just aesthetics is this incredibly powerful, poignant commentary about, like, for example, like the endangered birds, or there's more to it than meets the eye. So I find that really layered and interesting. And it was so funny when I had the pleasure of taking a class with Pat, and we actually all just saw each other at the NBO conference. So it is sort of a tight knit community for sure. But it's funny, I was thinking about Pat's work and like, how could I say how impacted I am about Pat's work? And I thought it's like a gut punch. And then I thought anyway, pun sort of intended. so I literally feel the impact of her work before I think it out. Like that open mouth. It's like, you know, it impacted me. And many of her pieces I respond to with a very visceral response prior to kind of intellectualizing it.
When I think of Ann's work, I think, first of all, I think of twining, that comes to mind. But then there's a breadth to the definition of what she's doing in her multiples and in her installations. And it's open work and it's tight work. And, you know, I think probably all three of us share the idea of just the breadth of the field, the widest possible definition of the field, with great respect to traditional ways of working and traditional examples and, you know, just what we've inherited from so many people before us. And, you know, I often think I don't exactly fit into this or that. I don't know. I just feel I choose to, when I make something, I think it's coming from what I have to say. And if it comes out in a basketry form, that's one, you know, it's because I must feel in the making that that's the best way to say what I'm trying to say, or not. But anyway, I feel Ann's work is also very content-based, that the ideas come through in the work. And to me, that's a strength. Yeah.
And that we've, you know, I've admired Pat and Ann's work for ages. We've been friends for a long time. And our work is on the surface very different, but actually we're dealing with a lot of the same things. We're all dealing with issues. We're all trying to innovate in some ways. And in a formal sense, we all began with vessels and then expanded out from there till all of us are doing some wall works now.
Thank you so much. I'm also struck by the fact that you're all also really playing with versions of scale that in many instances, like a trajectory goes from small to large, and in instances too, I'm seeing then a kind of maybe retraction back to a smaller scale to tell a different story. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about kind of how scale plays into how you're thinking about a finished work. I will also say that I very much invite our audience members to join us in the chat and ask questions, and I will relay them as I see them. So please do feel free to type away.
I think I hate the idea of limitations. I remember I used to feel that I could only work as big as something would fit in my VW. Or I could only, if it would meet UPS limitations. And I just thought that's really stupid. You don't want to think like that. And yet, probably one of the biggest influences for me was to be part of that Lausanne biennial, where, I mean, it was amazing to see what other artists, how they interpreted this big idea of big pieces. One woman from France, Pierre Bloch was her name. I mean, she just had a knotless netted line across this whole gallery. And that's how she interpreted it. And I love the idea that scale can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, it was just a real lesson to me, and it doesn't have to be literally big because of the dimensions of the gallery. One can play with that. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, scale, I've gotten gradually larger. I think it sort of happened without thinking about it too much. The work just grew. But because of the nature of the process, it is something that I tend to work on small in small increments. Like the large wall pieces are all composed of smaller elements. And I do think about those things that Pat mentioned, the shipping and the size of my studio, but then also working in component parts that I assemble to make the larger pieces is one way to deal with the practical side of it.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, scale comes from the idea. So if the idea requires it, like that piece I did for the COVID, that was the largest piece I'd ever twined. And it was, I mean, over my head. I pulled off the spokes or warps and measured those out ahead of time. Um, to me, it's a commitment. Like if I'm doing a twined piece that's 6 feet tall, it's I have to make that commitment to giving months and months to this one piece. And for that particular one, I was willing to do it. But I don't necessarily want to scale up the individual material. I like the tiny little human movements that collectively make a larger piece. So I don't want to take big, giant, arm-sized uh, materials to build larger. So when I go really big in terms of twining, it's just I have to be committed to it. But or then like both of my esteemed panelists, that I like to work in multiples and use multiples to build a larger installation type thing. So, and that to me is really satisfying because it's really not a bigger scale. I can make a whole bunch of things, like I'm installing a show tomorrow where I have 95 of things that are about this big. And that is manageable, for me to kind of accomplish. So.
We have some more practical questions coming in on the thread. So we have someone who's curious to know about whether any of you use studio assistants or whether this is all facture that's happening just with you.
I,
With
I have not used assistants. I think it's just what I prefer to do with my own hands, and find my way, and to have to explain that to anybody else, that isn't how I've worked. Yeah.
Yeah, same with me. I do it all myself. I mean, in my dream world, I might hire someone to handle all the other things, the paperwork side of it. But I feel like I need to do everything with my own two hands.
Yeah, I had one time I had a studio assistant that helped with a large scale netted project that I started, and then they helped tie knots. It was because I was teaching and I had a graduate student that was interested, and it worked out. So but that was, I know, a couple decades ago or a decade ago, and I just don't I'm the same. I like the process. I
Yeah.
want my hands on it somehow. It's for me, that's if I was doing something like a bronze cast, I've had help when I've done bronze work, or like something that's outside, like I'm having help doing welding. I'll design it and then have someone weld it. So in that sense, I've had some studio assistants, but I'm with Carol. I want someone to do my paperwork so I can go to the
Me
studio.
too. Me too.
Oh.
Um, I have an interesting question coming in about the physicality of the practice. This is someone who has been a basket maker since high school, but is now in their 60s and is really wondering how the physical aspect of your practice perhaps changes as you grow older, but sort of how you account for that over the long durée life of an artist.
Well, I'm probably the only octogenarian in the group. And I think it keeps you younger to just keep doing and going to the studio and imagining what you can make next. I mean, I think probably some of the physical challenges. I mean, I have hired someone recently to build an overhead structure when I was suspending units on a major installation. I mean, this man knew what he was doing, and there was no way I was going to do that. But I also feel I can still go up on a stool and do what I want to do. And I'm not ready to say I can't do that. So I keep trying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fortunate I haven't encountered any physical limitations. I sometimes worry, about hands, but they still keep working and they keep doing what I need them to do. And I guess, like Ann mentioned, I mean, it's what I'd rather be doing than anything else. So that sort of carries me through. And my watch says take a break, and I go, no, not now. I'm in the middle of something. But I do try and think of those sorts of things, like, those normal sorts of recommendations they make about taking breaks. But um, you know, I can still do everything that I've always been able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I have had a couple little things. I had trigger thumb once, and I had that taken care of, a little injection here and there, and now, knock on wood, wherever new, knock on wood, they've been fine. I tried it. That was one of the reasons I was twining for the first decade, basically, of my studio practice. And then I started thinking I need to do other things with my hands, because this one is the repetition of that. I didn't know if I could sustain that over time. So that was another reason I brought in netting and looping and crochet and other lashing and different techniques. And so I try to alternate. If I'm in the studio many days in a row, I try to alternate as best I can. Or do the sketchbook too. That's nice. And I am meticulous caring for my hands. Like, if I have a little paper cut, it's so easy to just ignore a little paper cut, but no, you clean it with either hydrogen peroxide or alcohol, put a Band-Aid over it. It seems so ridiculous on that teeny tiny cut, but then it's gone fast. And I need these in top condition. And doing stretching, and I try to be very careful about my tools.
So maybe one final question, which is one that we kind of discussed over email, was it's actually kind of a very basic one that perhaps I should have started with, but was whether you all self-define as basket makers, whether that is a moniker that you embrace, or whether that's something. I think, Pat, you talked about sort of the difficulties with sort of particular definitions in your own creative practice, but whether you do define yourselves as basket makers.
Well, I guess how I think of myself is as part of the basketry community. And sometimes I am making things that are recognizable about as baskets, but sometimes I'm making things using basketry processes or basketry concepts in other ways. Um, but I think of myself more as part of the community, as just identifying as a basket maker per se.
I guess I usually say a basket maker. I 100% own it, because yay. But I usually say I'm a basket maker and sculptor.
Yeah, I think I tend to say an artist working in the fiber medium, and basketry is part of that. And, it's just a broad whatever. If I'm drawing, if I'm exhibiting something that has nothing to do with basketry, it still fits. I mean, it's what I do. And I'm grateful for it, and grateful for the tribe and the community that I think we have across the country, across the world, because of what we do. Yeah.
Well, very much as evidenced by the fantastic turnout that you all got for a fascinating conversation. So I'll turn it over to Tracy again to close us out. But thank you so much to the Textile Center. Thank you to Carol, to Pat, and to Ann for a really wonderful conversation.
And I would like to just quickly say thank you to you, Diana. It's really wonderful to have an art historian to sort of look at this, you know, not as a maker necessarily, but as someone who has respect for and questions and interest in what we're doing. And I really appreciate your being the moderator of the panel.
Oh gosh, my pleasure.
Hey, we're back. Thank you all so much. I had to quickly remove all those pins so we could have the audience present. I just want to thank everybody for coming today. What a fantastic and engaged conversation. And I have to tell you, I was so busy taking notes because I still take notes in this stage of the game. I just want to let everybody know that the recording will be available on Textile Center's website. Carol, I can't wait to get signed up for your blog. I'm going to say all the things that I am on. Yours is not one of them, and I'm really excited to check that out and get that every morning. Let's see, I think it's a reminder to everybody, please come and see the exhibit. If you're in Minneapolis, it's up until October 18th. Check out the rest of the activities in New York Textile Month. Please take a look at NBO, National Basketry Organization's website and other activities. I loved the part of the conversation where you guys were really talking about how NBO and the basketry peeps are a community, and it's not so much about like, do you identify as a basket maker, but the community aspect of it is so important. Just, you know, as a platform for sharing ideas and all of the techniques, everything from technique to material to concept. And I think the final reminder I'm going to make is to say, if you're in the Twin Cities, Textile Center is doing our fabulously huge garage sale, which many folks who have been affiliated with Textile Center know is a huge event for us. I don't have my notes in front of me. I apologize. I think it's the 19th through the 21st. Anybody from Textile Center can jump in and correct me. 19th to 21st of September here at the Textile Center, and there's information on our website. So thank you. Somebody just posted Carol's blog on in the chat if anybody needs a link to that. Textile Center again is textilecentermn.org. That's our website. And thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists. We're so honored to have you. Thank you, Dr. Greenwold. Absolute pleasure to have you as a facilitator and moderator. And I look forward to seeing everybody again in the future. Okay.
Thank
Have
you.
a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Keep those fingers busy.